Yes. So we're recording now. So there's a couple other things in terms of being market ready that you'll want to have in place. We highly recommend checking out the national guidelines. So the national guidelines, they are a tool and a guide for you and your business. We align ourselves with the national guidelines as well. So if you ever have questions on, okay, what do I need to be working on next? Head over to the national guidelines. Within it, it also gives you those other steps that you need to have in place to be market ready. You know, I had already mentioned a lot of this information, but it also means that you're able to return phone calls and emails within 24 hours. You know, it also means that if you're offering an outdoor experience, you have a backup plan, you have those contingency plans already in place before the visitors end up coming. And there's also some health and safety requirements in terms of being market ready. So these are some other things that you really need to check out. You need to always make sure that you're complying with health and safety regulations in your region. So make sure, you know, do you need WMIS? Do you need food and safety if you're a culinary experience? It also means that you need to have a well-stocked first aid kit and staff that are trained in first aid. I always tell this story because one of our members, Heather Black from Buffalo Stone Woman, you know, she does outdoor hikes and adventures. And last year, she was actually guiding a hike and they ran into a group who they weren't a part of her experience, but somebody had broke their ankle. And luckily, because she has her first aid training and she had all of her stuff in place because she's a market ready business, she was actually able to help out that person, you know, able to wrap up their leg, get them down to safety and then over to the hospital. So whether it's with your group or you never know who you're going to end up meeting up with as well, making sure that you have a first aid kit. And then you also need to have liability insurance. This is a mandatory requirement if you're going to be working with travel trade, which is working with international tourism. You typically need a minimum of 2 million liability. That's pretty standard. Some adventure tourism requires 3 million. So if you need help figuring out who the best insurance broker is, we can definitely help out with that. So just reach out to our team. Now, I'm going to dive into having a tourism website. We actually have an entire webinar all on how to build a good tourism website. But as part of this webinar, I'm just going to plug in a couple key things that you need. So when you are market ready, if you think about that word, market ready, it means that you are ready to market your business, right? Visitor ready was you're ready to host visitors. Now we've hosted them. People like our stuff. We want more people to get to know who we are and book at our experience. So having a tourism website is incredibly important. When we look online, most bookings are now done online. There's also a universality of the internet. You know, I can look up experiences that are in Finland. I can look up experiences that are across the world because everybody uses the World Wide Web. It's also a place for you to be able to host your information, and it increases the traffic and the awareness of your business. If you want to work in travel trade, you need a website. And actually for us at ITA and ITAC, having a website is part of being market ready as well. And it also proves your legitimacy. I say this because my mom, she makes these beautiful beaded hats and she was selling them, right? And a customer reached out and said, hey, I really want to buy this hat. How much is it? And you know, the hat was a little bit more expensive. And so my mom said, I totally understand, like, if you don't want to send like some random person money who you've never met before. And the person said, oh no, you know what? I checked out your website and I know that you're legit. And so that's how important it is to make sure that you have a website, because then people who are coming around the world or even coming for a weekend trip, they know that you are legit. So why do people like looking at websites? It means that they can do their research on their own time. They can come back to the website if they have questions. It's also very convenient. I don't know how much online shopping you've done in the last year. I've done a lot because it's too convenient sometimes, but that's a good thing too. And then it also gives the customer control, right? It gives them control over taking a look at your information and then booking your experience. So when you have a website, you really want to make sure that you're providing vital information. And I always say you want to provide this information in 30 seconds or less. So if you're wondering what you need to do better on your website, I suggest you take your phone out, you go to your website. First off, if your website doesn't go easily onto a phone, that's something that you should check out too. Go to your website and set a timer. And in 30 seconds or less, can you figure out what your business is, what you do, and then how do they book? You want to make sure that all of these things are in place. And I really like Talking Rock Tours website. I think they've done a fantastic job. So check out that website as well for some inspiration. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention before I kind of pass it off to Tom, who's doing lots of the heavy lifting on this webinar today, is you want to make sure that you have a place that's easy for people to book. So we suggest, like, when you start working with travel trade, when you become export ready, you do need to have an ability for people to book online. That is a requirement. It's not a requirement for being market ready. However, the easier you can make it for somebody to book online, the better time you'll have from people reading your information and then actually booking. You want to make sure that there's a book now button. Whether or not you're actually working with a reservation system, that's fine. A really good example of this is Pepes Chow. I highly recommend checking out Pepes Chow's website because they don't have an online booking reservation, but they still have a way that you can send an email or book now, and it sends them an email and then they figure it out afterwards. So really important to have this. So again, if you want to learn a little bit more about what you need to have on a website, check out our webinar on having a good tourism website. It's just on our website, www.indigenoustourismalberta.ca. You can find all of your information there. Aha, see? I already have it up here. We also have a hosting travel media, but Tom's going to get a little bit into hosting travel media right away here. We have a little bit of social media planning, website development, and then even some cost-effective marketing strategy webinars. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a plug because on Thursday, we're going to be doing a webinar on being export ready and working with travel trade. So please feel free to check that out. And then I'm going to put into the chat an awesome resource that we've created called the Tourism Development Matrix. And all of these conditions that we have that you need to have in place to be market ready and then export ready, it goes through all of those so that you can just check them right off once you've completed them. And it gives you a great path forward. So I'll send that into the chat as well. And then, of course, if you ever need any help on the development side of your business, feel free to reach out to us. So we have Kayla, we have Curtis, we have myself, and we have 2 other team members who are going to be starting next week. So we're very excited to be able to provide our membership with even more support. So that is it for me on the development side. And I'm going to pass it over to Tom, who's going to start to share a little bit more information on marketing.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Let me just pull up my screen here. Yeah, I'm going to talk about marketing today. Mackenzie, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my screen being shared?
I don't see it yet, Tom.
Let's try this again. How about this?
Now I see it.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, Mackenzie, you mentioned the last couple of webinars we've had. And there were marketing components to all of them. This is sort of a series of 4 webinars. This is the 3rd one. The first 2 were sort of getting started in your marketing, getting up to speed. Today, we're at Market Ready. And so we're calling it Sustaining Your Fire. And so what we're going to cover today is sort of the next level of marketing after you've been set up and established as a business. You're offering a good product, you're getting great feedback from your customers, and you're ready to start doing some promotion beyond sort of the basic social media stuff. So we'll talk a bit today about branding and audience, and then we'll dip our toe into paid advertising. And then at the end, we'll talk about working with media and influencers. So we shall dive right into some of this. So the first thing I wanted to talk a bit about was branding and audience. And we talked in the last session about a brand really just being an extension of you, your business. It's what your business stands for. It's the story that you share with the world about yourself as a person or yourself as a business, or even the product that you share. And so when it comes to branding and marketing, there's 2 things I think that lead to good marketing. One is that brand is like, it's really the things that you stand for as a business. And the other part is the audience. It's the things about your business that the audience cares about. And so the great marketing really is where these 2 things overlap. It's like the customer's looking for something and you're able to give it to them. That is sort of the sweet spot for good marketing. And I have a couple of examples here. The first one is an old Apple example, these 2 guys, which Mackenzie had to remind me that maybe I'm showing my age by using this example, but these are the old Apple TV ads where there was these 2 guys. The guy on the left was intended to represent Microsoft, and the guy on the right was intended to represent Apple. The Microsoft guy was very stuffy and nerdy, and the Macintosh guy was sort of slacker and cool. It was the 2000s, so apparently that was cool, as were baggy suits and baggy pants, apparently. So what worked about these were very successful advertising for Apple, is that at the time, Apple was not sort of the behemoth it is today. This is pre-iPhone. They were trying to sell computers in a market that was dominated by Microsoft. And so what they were offering was a product that was for artists, for creatives. It was more about how things looked and how you could manipulate them. Apple was the first one to introduce different typefaces and fonts, for example, whereas Microsoft was all about the office, the stuffy office environment. And so they sort of pitched themselves as being different than Microsoft in this way. And it worked because at the time, people who bought Apple computers tended to be those who wanted to be different. They defined themselves by not being involved in the corporate culture. They were a little bit different. They tended to be more artistic. They were more creative. They worked in their creative fields. And so it really was this perfect, blending of the product matching what the customer wanted. So the point I'm trying to make here is that sweet spot is really where the great marketing came in. And you don't need $1 million budgets to do this. I just pulled this example today. Some of you are doing it already. I think Heather's on this call today. 2 shout outs to Buffalo Stone Woman in the webinar today. Here we go. This is from her Instagram. I don't know if she would call this marketing, but it certainly is marketing to me anyway. She does a lot of posts like this. And I think this is a good example of these 2 things intersecting as well. She does guided hikes. And I think with posting pictures like this and marketing what she offers as a hiking guide to get to these places where you can feel a sense of accomplishment, she brings a lot of culture and her indigenous background into it. I think that's really important as well. And it really overlaps with people who want to do this kind of thing. They want to have this picture at the summit, at the frozen waterfall. So I think it's a really effective way of her brand really matching her audience. And that's sort of the sweet spot for good marketing. So it's happening all over the place. You can have 0 budget, or you can have millions and millions of dollars. It's not really about budget. It's more about ideas and focus and creativity. So if you know yourself and your brand, the tricky part can be then figuring out your audience. And I get this question a lot, is like, well, how do I know who to target? And the answer to that is a little complicated, but suffice to say, if you've created your product with a customer in mind, then you're already doing the first thing. I think the people who most enjoy your product, your experience, those are the ones that you need to target. They're your target audience. So I think that's probably the most important part of it, is like thinking about the type of person who wants to come and experience what you're offering. But there are also a lot of other resources. You can come to us. We've got a few resources, ITAC. has resources at the federal level as well. Destination Canada has for a long time used this thing called the Explorer Quotient, where they used a lot of market research to come up with marketing personas of different types of travelers. There are cultural explorers, as an example, of people who like to travel because they want to explore culture. There's learners, people who travel because they want to learn. There are adventurers, I can't remember what they call them, but there's little personas for different types of travelers. So what you can do is Google this, find what they offer, and then maybe think about your business as you look at the personas. That might help you find your target market. You can also look at your social media analytics. We talked a bit about analytics in the last webinar. If you look at the data on your social media posts, it can give you some insight into, what type of person likes to engages with you, or might give you some insight into their age or where they're from or their activities and that sort of thing too. And of course, the best one is also your customers, the people who are already enjoying your product. Ask them, find out as much you can about them, and then go out and find more people like that. I think that's really the key to targeting. And that's the segue, I think, into the next bit, which is dipping your toe into paid advertising. And we'll start here with digital social media advertising, because it does seem to be the simplest thing for most people to dip their toe into these days, because most people are doing social media anyway. So there really are two parts to advertising and social media. We'll do a lot of digital advertising today, but we'll start here with social media. There's sort of two facets to it. There's paid advertising, paid ads, buying a paid ad, and then there's organic. So organic is what you're probably doing already. It's reach, it's building a community. Or organic reach is not putting any money into it, but just building a community with your posts and your charm. But you can use money to reach more people like that as well. So the real strength about paid is that you can really target the people that you want to reach. That being said, the organic and paid worlds do sort of intermingle in lots of good ways. I mean, having a strong organic community will make your marketing more effective. The algorithms that we hear about on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter are the same across both paid and organic worlds. So if you have a really strong, vibrant, engaging, organic platform with a community that loves you, your advertising is going to be more efficient, will cost you less money, you'll reach more people. Sadly, they work together in the other way too, in that it's really getting difficult to build a giant or a big or a robust organic community without some paid advertising. The social media giants are giants for a reason. They know how to get your money. And one of the reasons they do that is because if you pay to build an audience, it does work together. It's almost hard to do it without it. But before we get into more details, I think the first thing you need to think about when you start doing paid advertising is your goals. So that last point, I think, is probably the most important here. Before you do anything, think about what you want from your advertising. Are you trying to build your community? Do you want clicks to your website? Do you want to make more sales? Do you want bookings from your website now that you have a great booking engine on your website? Or do you want to just reach your target audience? So it's important that you think about these things first before you get into it. Because the next part is where things get really interesting. There's two ways to put your money behind to reach audiences in social media. There's boosting and there's paid advertising. They're similar in a lot of ways, but there's a couple of key differences. So boosting a post is taking an existing post that you already have. You click the little boost button and you put some money into it, and then it expands who that post reaches. So usually with an organic post, if you post something, what happens is the algorithm decides how many people are going to see it, who's going to see it, based on what it thinks people want to see. And the more engagement you get on that post, the bigger it will grow. So the goal is always to have a big post. People want to go viral. You should never aim for virality. You should aim for a community. But you can also put a little money behind it and it will grow a little bit farther. It's the community, it's the platforms offer you a chance to buy a little bit of an audience that's bigger. So that's for an existing post, but you can also do a whole paid ad that's not a post on your community. You can just build it from scratch. And I have two ads here from Travel Alberta. My previous job was at Travel Alberta, so I have a few examples here from them. And you can't really tell the difference as a consumer. The one on the left here is a boosted post. The one on the right is a paid ad. The only difference really there is at the bottom, it's got more of a clear, what we call a call to action, that book now button. So both are effective. You just sort of have to think about what your goals are and what you want to do with them. It's just kind of important to understand the difference between boosting and doing a paid ad. No matter what you do, either of them, what you want to do is make sure your targeting is good. And this is what social media is great at. The thing that you can do with social is target your people very specifically. And what I have here is an example of how we can target. This is actually what we're doing in the ITA campaign that's out in market right now. Targeting means, I think in the old days, people would think of targeting as only demographic. It'd be like, I want to hit women who are between 35 and 44. And that is one thing. But because social media platforms have so much data on all of us, you can get a lot more targeted than that these days. It may sound a bit creepy, but this is when, as a marketer, this comes in really effective. It's probably, you can think a bit about demographics, but think more about interests. So there's interest targeting is what it's called. And as you can see here, we're targeting people who have showed an interest in their social media platforms on things like travel, winter experiences, indigenous, outdoor experiences, historic sites, cultural history, all those sorts of things. When you get into the advertising world in your Facebook platform where you can build the ad, it's almost endless, the number of interests that you can choose for some people. So really think about your business and what type of people you think want your product or want your experience, and really get as targeted as you can. It's really hard to get too specific. It's a cool tool. As you add more things, your audience starts out broad, and as you add more interest, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, meaning you're getting targeted more and more and more. And a good practice when you're just starting is to be as targeted as you can. At some point, you might want to broaden enough, but I think if you really are interested, be as targeted as you can. I hope that makes sense. We'll have time for questions at the end. I just want to make a quick note about the changing expectations of privacy and how it's affecting marketing. Some of you may have heard about some changes that Apple made to its devices recently. In which case, when you probably see alerts on your phone sometimes when you're in an app and it asks you if you are okay sharing your data with third parties. And if you're like 90, I think it's 97% of people who say, no, I don't want to share. So this is a big change in the use of your iPhone, and it affects marketers more than anyone else because it does limit the amount of information that's shared across platforms. And as we saw on the last Facebook quarterly call, it had a huge impact on Facebook's advertising business. It makes it much more difficult for Facebook to target as effectively as they did before. Now, as like a human who lives in this world, I think most people would agree that taking more care in the use of our data is not a bad thing, but it does make our jobs as marketers a little bit more important. That's not just Apple. Google said they're going to do the same thing. They just delayed it by a year. It was supposed to happen this year. Now it's going to happen next year in their Chrome browser and on their Android devices. So it's coming. The privacy world is changing. So marketing is going to get harder. But that just means having a strong community will be more important than ever. So just don't worry too much about that stuff. It's out of your hands anyway. Just create great product, have strong social media, build a community. And if stuff is engaging with your audience, as we talked about in our last webinar, that's what you need to focus on. Don't worry about these things you can't control. Worry about creating great product and create engaging content. There we go. I hope that makes sense. That was about social media advertising. I'd also want to touch a bit here on search advertising. And now search advertising is something you may not see if you're not looking for it, but this is an example of it here. So you can, on Google, you can advertise on specific keywords. And here's an example of what the consumer sees. So this is from my own browser, I search for Indigenous tourism Alberta, and these top search results, these ones here that say ad right at the top, those are ads. Those are ads that companies have paid for. They paid to get in that position ahead of the search results. And as you can see, Indigenous Tourism Canada, or ITAC Destination Indigenous is in there. We're in there. Lethbridge region is also doing some advertising on these specific keywords. So that's interesting. The way it works is it's like a bid process. It's an auction. And so anyone who wants to bid on these words can do so, but the keywords go to the highest bidder. And so that's important to keep in mind. If you're trying to bid on keywords that are very popular, they're going to be more expensive than those that are not as popular. So Search advertising is really good in a lot of time, a lot of contexts and a lot of moments, I think. But it really works best when there already is some search interest in your product. So if you are doing something really popular, I don't know, say you're selling pants by Kim Kardashian, your search advertising would probably be very effective because there's already so much search volume for Kim Kardashian out there. One of the things that we've noticed at Indigenous Tourism Alberta is that there's not a lot of current search interest in phrases like Indigenous tourism. We think this is one of the reasons that I'm here is we need to change that. That's one of the goals we have, is to make people more aware of Indigenous tourism as a thing. And it will change over time, absolutely. We will definitely move the needle on that too. But it's a difficult thing to buy search advertising on because the volume of search is so low. So I would recommend thinking about your business in addition to it being an Indigenous tourism experience. So if you're a hiking guide and you want to do some search advertising, yeah, buy the Indigenous search terms, but also look for things like hiking or nature walks or medicine walks, just sort of broader search terms. Think about what a traveler might look for when they're planning their holiday, and just think of it that way. That's kind of the best way you can do it. There's a couple of other tips that we can share at next webinar, but that really is the fundamental thing, is think about, when you're planning your holidays, what do you look for? Now try to imagine someone doing that and winding up on your website. I'd also say search is very competitive in the tourism world. As you can see from my example here, there's 3 people bidding on very specific terms of Indigenous Tourism Alberta. And if you start going beyond that, it gets even more competitive. So if you're searching for things like canoeing Canada, imagine how many people are bidding on search terms like that. So what's important, I think, too, is to partner up. And we do this at ITA. We partner with Travel Alberta so that we're not competing, we're not bidding against each other on the same words. And Travel Alberta also does the same thing with Destination Canada, so that we're not, we don't want to drive up the prices for each other when we're all on the same team and we all have the same goals. So a good idea is to, give us a call, talk to us about what our search program. If you're in an area with a DMO, if you're, Banff Lake Louise Tourism or Calgary Tourism, Edmonton Tourism, something like that, recommend connecting with them. They all are doing the same thing, and everyone's working really hard to avoid, making costs go up for everyone by competing on keywords. So it's definitely, partnering is a great thing to do in the search world. All right, the next thing I wanted to speak about was digital display advertising. And so these are the banner ads you see on websites. You see them all over the place now on your phone, on websites in the right rail or along the top, or sometimes it's big home pages. It can be a complicated world, but the simplest thing to do it, I think, is just to create an account on Google Ads and dip your toe into it that way. Platforms like Google have made it really simple to do advertising, to do display advertising. You really just follow the cues that they've got. But again, I just want to reiterate the importance of thinking about your goals and your audience and your message. Why are you building these ads? What do you want to get from them? I think it could be tempting for a lot of entrepreneurs to think they need to be out there advertising and they just feel the need to throw money into it. But if you're not doing something that with a measurable outcome, then you're never going to know if your money is being put to good use. So make sure you think about that a lot before you go. And another thing to think about is that you need good photography. If you're going to do a display ad, you need something for people to look at. And so you need either great photography or great graphic design. You need something that can hook people. Part of that is good copy editing and a clear call to action. If it's book now or learn more, you need something that you want to grab people's attention, you want to give them some information, and you want them to click on it. So those are 3 things to think about. But again, these are worlds, there's lots to talk about in digital display advertising. It's another good place to partner with your DMO or your Friendly Neighborhood Indigenous Tourism Association. How's that for a plug? Just some general tips for paid advertising across all platforms. Again, be clear in your goals, make sure they're attainable and measurable. And that can be things, what do I mean by the goals? It should be something like, I want this many clicks to my website in 2 months, or I want to increase my bookings by 20% over the next 6 weeks. If you haven't done this before, it can be hard to come up with a goal, but you have to start somewhere. So just give it a go and adjust in the future. That's how measuring success. That's what I mean about measuring success. Set an attainable goal that you can reach and make sure you do it. Thinking long-term, I think, is important too. The best advertising campaigns and the way that we go about it at ITA is to think about the complete customer journey. We have different campaigns for awareness ads for people who've never even thought about Indigenous tourism. We have different ads for what we call consideration, which is people who know of Indigenous tourism, but maybe don't have enough information to make a booking. And then we have very specific targeted ads that encourage people to like get out their credit card and spend that money. So to really move the needle on marketing, it's a long-term investment. You have to think about sort of the broad scope of things. And that's why partnership is important. No one ever has enough money for marketing or enough time. So partnering in a way that can make it more effective for everybody is really important. So that's it for paid advertising. How are we doing for time? Okay, good. I've got lots of time to babble. Next, I want to talk a bit about working with media and influencers. And this is basically getting your business mentioned in newspapers, websites, videos, magazines. Here's a couple of examples that Mackenzie has gathered over the years. Some are print, some are online, some are driven by photos. They're really exciting when you get mentioned by a publication like this. But it is kind of a not double-edged sword. I'd say there are opportunities and there are risks to media marketing, to earned media marketing, we call it. Opportunities are, there's almost no better way to raise awareness of your business or your industry through paid media. And that's because they still have mass markets. The mass media has splintered a lot over the last 10 or 15 years, but it's still the best way of reaching a huge number of people. And you can do that with the least amount of investment if you get lucky too, right? Like you're not paying to advertise, you're not buying ads. You can do it just by sharing a great story. And it does allow for deeper storytelling, which I think for a lot of our members is really important because a lot of the experiences offered by members are really about connecting. It's about sort of that human to human, one-to-one connection. The risks is that you have little control over the final message. It's not like an ad where you can obsess over it for weeks and weeks and then make sure every I is dotted exactly how you like. You can have very little control over the final message. And it also can be difficult to know who to work with because there's a lot out there, and it can be difficult to measure results. You're not going to get a report at the end of your at the end saying you've reached this many people and this many people clicked. You sort of have to, you might never really know if through earned media. But there's also great upsides. Before we dive into a little bit deeper, I just want to speak a bit about travel media. And this are the things, like some of these examples we have up top, these top 10 lists, top 10 ways to explore Indigenous culture, a 5-day road trip through Indigenous Alberta, these sorts of things. You may think these come about just on the dogged research of the reporter who wrote it, but there is actually a whole bunch of infrastructure in the travel media world behind it to make this stuff happen. And a lot of it comes from operators like you and DMOs like us and our partners. And there is a bit of a cycle that goes on here too, and I'll walk you through this a bit. The first step here is a pitch to media. So, we have an earned media PR agency that works on our behalf, and they are in contact with journalists all the time, sending story ideas, asking what works or what are they looking for, telling good stories, all with the idea of trying to get a journalist to come out and write a great piece or tell a great story. If the journalist shows interest, we move on to the next bit, which is developing a personalized itinerary. And this means when there's a journalist coming to visit for what we call a fam trip or a familiarization trip, we will develop an itinerary specific to them to give them the opportunity to have an amazing experience in Alberta so they can write about it for their audience back at their publication. So we develop the itinerary, then the media comes and this says, visits Edmonton because we stole this from Explore Edmonton. They wouldn't mind, they're fine with it. Media visits you, visits Alberta, they're here. Often what happens is when they arrive, we'll take them for dinner, sort of educate them. It's a good opportunity for learning, for reflection. And then we host the trip. We may pass them off to some of our members like you. We may be there with you sometimes. There's lots of different ways of hosting the trip. But really the key part is that we the journalist experiences something that gives them a story that they will write about that will engage people. Once that's done, the coverage is published, whether it's in a newspaper or a magazine or a television station or something like that. And then we evaluate the coverage, whether it's good or bad. We take those learnings and we do the cycle all over again. This is constantly happening in the background. I think there is some seasonality to it, but really it's a always on sort of thing. So that's what I mean when I say there's infrastructure. These stories don't just happen by magic. They happen because a lot of work has been done to set it up. So I'll talk a bit about, I have a couple of examples to show you that here coming up, but a couple of things here about the differences between traditional media and what we could sometimes call influencers now. So traditional media is usually built around a FAM, but personalized requests come in. And so if you're confronted as a business owner with one of these requests, there's a couple of things you should probably think about. And it's okay to ask these questions to your DMO or to the journalist is, who are you writing for? You know, what's the publication? And what you want to find out is the audience. What's the audience of the publication? Does the audience of the publication overlap with your audience? Find out what the story angle is. When will it be published? If all of these things align to what your goals are as a business owner, great, then go for it. If they don't, it might be worth asking a few more questions or asking if they can come at a different time or maybe suggest something else. Or it's also okay to say no, that it's just not a good fit. I think everybody would rather hear that than to come and have an experience that is not what everybody wanted. Also be clear on your expectations, ask them what they need, what they're hoping for, you know, be clear on whether they want, if there's going to be photography or video involved. I'd also say be aware that everything that they experience on the journey, on the trip could be part of the story. So you want to always be putting your best foot forward. You know, these are all people and they'll connect with you on a human level, but also just be aware that everything is part of the experience for them. And also I always just say, try to exceed expectations, give them something special that makes them feel special. And that will probably reflect positively in your story. We get lots of questions about protocol. And I think what we've learned is most media still don't understand proper Indigenous protocol. And so you may need to do some educating for them. And I think that's okay. I think they would appreciate it. You know, I think some of them won't even know to ask, is it okay for me to take photos of that smudge? So if you have some expectations, don't assume they know. Tell them what is fair game and what isn't. You know, 9 times out of 10, they'll respect that. But just be aware that they probably don't understand things as deeply as we all would like them to. And if you need help, please ask us. Like I said, we've got an agency that's really good at this stuff. We work with them with media all the time. So please let us help you. Influencers are a little bit different than traditional media, but it's the same world. You know, an influencer is basically a content creator with an audience. That means they could be someone who's on Instagram and has a big audience, or maybe they create videos on YouTube. It's really a similar process to what we see with traditional media. So you can ask the same questions. You know, if someone's interested, if an influencer is interested in visiting you at your experience, by all means, you need to ask the questions. You know, who are you? You know, who is your audience? You know, questions like, what's your engagement rate? Just to make, you want to ask questions to find out if they're legit. Make sure you Google them. Make sure they are publishing regularly, that they are, they have done trips like this before, that they are trustworthy. I think you can sometimes just tell by their content. Look at their YouTube page. If they're a YouTuber, do they publish every week or every month? Great. If they haven't published in 2 years, that's probably an alarm bell. And again, make sure their audience aligns with yours. And I'd say make sure their values align with yours as well. I mean, if you have this is maybe a bad example, if you have an Instagrammer who is built a big following based on how they look in a bikini, and they want to come and do your medicine walk and learn about land, about traditional medicines, maybe that would be a good fit, but maybe it's not a good fit for you as well. These are just some of the things that you have to think about too. I think there's a lot of pressure among business owners to feel like they have to get in on the influencer space. I just say, don't feel the pressure. You know, come to us if you have questions. We can certainly help you out. And there is great opportunities. You know, my time at Travel Alberta, for example, we had some really great influencer trips, made some really great relationships, had some amazing content. And we had also opportunities that didn't work out so well for either the creator or for us. So, you know, it's a new world. People are still feeling it out. It's not as clear as some of the traditional media world opportunities are. So don't be shy about asking questions, and please come to us if you need it. We have a couple of things here, some best practices around hosting. So if you do get the opportunity to host media, make sure, sometimes they're groups, sometimes they're individuals. If you do have a group, make sure you meet them, give them a 5 to 10 minute overview of what they'll experience, what your business is, get right to the point, and then try to give them as seamless an experience as possible. You want it to replicate what the consumer will see, but also know that they're usually tight for time. Often journalists on trips are doing many things in a day. They may not have as much time as you would like, so they are kind of in a rush. So make sure it's as seamless and focused and efficient as possible. Make sure you're there be early, make sure you're there to greet them when they arrive. Timing can be a challenge sometimes, often if they're going from place to place on a fam trip from Edmonton to Jasper to Banff to Calgary to Siksika to Red Deer. Hitting all those times can be a challenge, so be patient with them as well. And always remember, you're an ambassador for your community. So what your behavior will reflect on your community as well. And so be a good host. I think all those things that make for a good experience apply to media as well. We often get asked what makes a good story. What are journalists looking for? And this is an example I'll come back to, but that is a great question. And this is something we think about all the time because we're always pitching media. And the way you pitch someone, a journalist, is to convince them that you've got a great story that their audience cares about. So a couple of general rules is if the story is timely and can connect to something that's currently in the news. If you're offering a story that's different than what everybody else has, they're always looking for exclusive content or at least different content. Connections to culture are really great. So dates in the calendar, anniversaries, commemorations, trends, but also think about the story that you want to tell. And sometimes getting your story out there can be done in a roundabout way through some creative pitching. I'm going to give an example right here. This is a recent Globe and Mail story that mentions several members of ITA, but I wouldn't say it's a traditional travel story. It was, here's the headline: Indigenous tourism's role in reconciliation. So it really was about the role that tourism can play in reconciliation. And it wasn't a traditional travel piece in that it was all about, make sure you go here and then you go here and then you go here. But what it did do is connect to a different kind of audience. And I think if your product, like this is, I mentioned Métis Crossing here, Métis Crossing really is about a learning experience, about a deeper connection. I think the type of person who's going to read a story like this is probably this big type of audience that they're looking for as well. So that's a pretty cool example. Can I give another example of Mackenzie today, where in our pitching that we regularly do to media, we sent out a press release last week highlighting a lot of ITA members, businesses that are owned by women, and we tied it to International Women's Day, which is coming up. And we got a great response. We had 3 or 4 media's interests. Mackenzie was interviewed today as a rep on ITA. I think we've touched 4 or 5 members who also got interviewed through all of this media activity. So again, that was just sort of being creative and finding a date on the calendar that the media was interested in. We managed to sort of connect tourism to it as well, and it worked out this time. It doesn't always work out, but this time it did. Luckily, we have great spokespeople in our members and in Mackenzie, so we got that worked out really well. Then how can we work together, meaning ITA and you as a member? So let us know, make sure that we always know about your products or experiences. I know you're talking to the development team a lot. If you've got something new, tell us, maybe we can help sell it. Maybe we can get some media interest in it. Reach out to us if you have a cool story idea, please let us know. Try to have great images or video of your business, on your computer somewhere stored, so that if someone asks, you can give it to them. Often journalists will send a writer, but not a photographer. And if you can give them photos, that just makes it better for everybody. If you've got a news release, let us amplify, let us know about it. Be willing and available to host media. If you have events coming up, yeah, Mackenzie, thank you for that. That's a great point. Make sure to tell us. We love events and we are always looking to help amplify all of that, and just be open and willing to host media. It can be intimidating talking to media for the first time, but we can help. We can prep you. We have some veterans who have done this many times who can share. We can give you some pointers and be there with you, so it's a smooth, seamless experience. And that's it from me. Mac, you've done a lot of this media work or any of that. Is there anything you wanted to add here as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, like whenever we're hosting media, um, it's we we host media as if they are brand new to Indigenous culture, to experiences. We really try to take them through, providing as much detail as possible. I find it makes a better story too. And then yeah, just like engaging with them afterwards as well. Like, you know, we'll always follow up and say, hey, do you need, like, we have an awesome media kit full of great photos and B-roll from us, because then you're able to really, you know, they're going to write the story that they are going to write. But if you're able to provide them like some really good photos that you really enjoy, that you feel showcases your business, maybe better than the photos that they took during the trip, because sometimes they'll take photos or they won't. I think as well, you know, you do end up meeting a lot of people who don't know what protocol is, those kind of things, and it's a great chance for you to educate people. You know, we've been asked very deep questions about our drumming and singing, and we'll just explain to them, oh, hey, that's what we call a tobacco question. That's a question where you would provide us with protocol, and that's because that is a sacred question. And so when we accept our tobacco, it's a question between you, me, and the creator, right? And then we can properly honor that question. So there's opportunity to really educate the people. But I see that Glenda has their hand up. So Glenda, I'm just going to allow you to talk if you have a question. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
I really don't have a question, just a comment. I'm looking forward to going to the next month's workshop that you're hosting. And I'd like to see how we can work with Indigenous Tourism Alberta for our shops that for our Samson Native Gallery that we have in Lake Louise. It's been there for a while, and we'd like to kind of have some little more exposure. Samson does own the Samson Mall there in Lake Louise, and we have for just about 40 years. And a lot of people don't know that it's owned by the Samson Cree Nation, so we'd like to. And we also have a Samson Native Gallery now at West Edmonton Mall, which is doing well. So we kind of want to work with that. All the rest are within the reserve here, all the other businesses that we run are within the reserve. But we'd like to maybe work with your advertising or your, I don't know what you call it, your journalists, to maybe do a piece on Samson management and Samson Cree Nation businesses.
Amazing. That sounds, yeah, that's awesome, Glenda. What we'll do is could you send us an email? So I'll type in an email. If you want to just send us an email. We'll get you connected with Tom and his team, and yeah, start to help you out. I know I've been to the Lake Louise location quite a few times. I love your guys' store. I think it's fantastic. So thank you so much, Glenda.
Okay.
Can I just give kudos to Glenda for showing us an example of a good media pitch? I think you just made a pitch there. You know, you've got the story, the background on it, and yeah, please get in touch. I think there's some great opportunity. Also, I'm just looking at the names on the call. There are members of ITA who are doing great marketing now. I see lots of names on here who are already doing really good work. So come to us, we can connect you to each other. Look at what everybody else is doing. I think there's lots to be learned from the community we have here.
Amazing. So before we end today, just wanted to see if there are any other questions. So we'll just give a second if people want to post in the chat, or just like Glenda did, you can raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you guys so that then you can talk as well if you have any questions. All right, I think we might be good then. So if you do have any questions, and I like shut off the Zoom and you're like, no, I had another question, feel free to just email us. We're always happy to set up a time to chat with you and to help you through some marketing. There's also just like really good tools out there as well. Check out our past webinars too. But thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope that everybody has a really fantastic day. Thank you so much, Kelly. And we'll chat soon. So take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
LinkedIn.